Hello. Today we're going to talk about how to fill out a score sheet correctly. It is actually very important to fill these out correctly. Most officials will kind of correct your mistakes, but sometimes they're such a hot mess that they can't correct all the mistakes, and it makes it harder after the fact to kind of tell what happened in that game. So let's go over the score sheet. This is the MoHockey score sheet that they provide. So we start out, you need to fill out the date, what type of game it is. I always work top down. Where that game is going to be played. So that would be Jordan Valley Ice Park. That's our home park. And then the division that you're in, and then what level you are. So for the home team, obviously, for our team, it would be the Springfield Spirit. And then you just put your opponent's name. And then along this part over here, this is where the team information would go. So these are the players and the names and positions. Usually your team managers or coaches will have stickers to put on there. That is very, very helpful. And they should be on each one of the layers. So there shouldn't just be one sticker on top and then nothing underneath. Each layer needs to have a separate sticker on that. For any players who are injured, they should be crossed out and put INJ for injured. If they're suspended, they need to be indicated as well on that. So some people use SSD, SSP, suspended, SUSP, whatever you want to do. You just mark them out and they need to be indicated that they're serving a suspension. If you don't mark them out and they don't serve their suspension, they get to serve another game. So that's lovely. So you have stickers on both sides for the home game and then the visiting team. And then always make sure that you don't start the game before the coaches sign this form. This doesn't mean that they agree with the outcome of the game. This little signature right here actually just says that they're verifying that this is their list of players for that game. So it's like in baseball when the coach provides the umpires with the roster and the starting lineup. So I've already completed this sheet. So I'm going to just work out from the top down. So the final here was 3-1. So when a score happens, what you're going to do is you're going to fill out who scored and how they scored and what time they scored. So here's a little trick. In addition to this handy dandy little form, you're going to need 1 or 2 pens. I always bring 2 because sometimes when the rink is cold, a pen won't work. So I'll bring it back up, keep it in my pocket, and that way it's always warm. And I also have a sheet of scrap paper, because what happens is I actually, whenever a whistle happens and I know that someone either scored or there's a penalty going on, I will look at the clock, I will write the time down. So let's say it was 3:03. Oops, 3:03. And then the official is going to skate up and either try to tell you who scored, and sometimes they will be able to be heard, sometimes they won't. But what happens is I just freehand write this. I don't have any little boxes I have to stay in. So I'm looking at that official's mouth as well, and I'm reading their lips, and I'm also listening to what they say. And then, so if they say goal by, I'm not even looking at my piece of paper right now, goal by 14 from 2 and 23. I'm just blank writing that, and that way I know it was a goal at 3:03, 14 from 2 and 23. So this is the goal. This would be assists. So that's how I write that down. If it's a penalty, I usually I look up the clock, I write the time, and then I look at the official. They're going to give you a sign. That sign will tell you what penalty it is. You need to know your signs. Look those up. There's a lot of really good either videos or just a cheat sheet where you can tell what signs go with what penalty. So the usual ones that get mixed up are interference and cross-checking. People think an X means cross-checking. It does not. It means interference. Don't ask me why. That's just the way it is. Cross-checking is when like people hold like a stick up and push it towards someone else. That would be cross-checking. But interference is an X. So no, you're tripping, no interference, no slashing, all those signs that are real common. You'll get to know those pretty quickly. But the big one is, I think, interference. People kind of mess that up. Roughing is another one that people kind of mix up. So back to this little sheet here. So what we've got here is first the number right here, this where it says NO, that's the number of the goal. The number 1 goal was scored, it says type here. That's actually what type of goal it is. So SH would be shorthanded, PP is power play, EN would be empty net. There's also 5/3, which would be 5-on-3. I have nothing in this one over here. That also indicates it was just a 5-on-5 regular goal, nothing different. You also have what period it was scored in. So this first one was scored in the first period. The time, you can either use the time on the clock or the time expired from the clock, but you need to be consistent throughout the whole form on how that works. So I usually put the time on the clock because then I don't have to do any more math than I need to. So that was scored at 2:01 in the first period. The person who scored the goal was number 2. He was assisted by number 93 and number 1. You'll see that these are all on the same line. You don't put them on separate lines. They all have to go on the same line because this is goal number 1. Goal number 2 was a power play goal in the second period at 11, expired in the period. It was a goal by number 1 and then assisted by number 2. There were no other assists. Then the third one was an empty net goal in the third period at 1:55 left in the period. And then that's scored by number 6. And I'm assuming he skated down there and just put it in the net because he did not have anyone who assisted him. So, and then if you look over here, same sort of thing. So I put little squiggles underneath telling me that there's no other goals after that. Sometimes the officials will want to do those squiggles themselves. Sometimes they will look at you like, why didn't you put those in? It's either hit or miss, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if there's any official rule, but I usually put them in and then allow them to yell at me later. So these are the scoring by period. So after each period, I usually just go and this is the number of goals scored in each period, and then they should all add up to the final score, which should also cross-check up here. You need to sign this as well, so I just print my name usually. This tells them who the official scorer was in there, and then here's the other place for the other coach to sign that. Now we get to the penalties. This is where people get tripped up a ton. So I'm just going to run through this. It gets super confusing over on this side, but if you look at this, you have in the first period, number 7 got called for a trip. He was penalized for 1:30 because we're in the 12U division. If you were in the, let's say the high school division, that would be 2 minutes usually. Those are actually easier to calculate for most purposes, but 1:30 on this, it was at 3 minutes left on the clock in that first period. So it started, so this is when they came off the ice. This is when his penalty started. Most of the time these are the same, but not always. I'll show you why here in a second. 3 minutes were when the penalty started, and nobody scored during that time period, so he left the box and went back on the ice in 1:30. Second one, number 3 was called for slashing. 1:30, he came off the ice at 4:56, and his penalty started at the same time, and no one scored a goal, so we went back on the ice at 3:26. In the second period, number 4 was also called for cross-check, which if you look over here, you can also put X-check. Sometimes people will do that. So same sort of situation where they came off the ice and went back on the ice. Nobody scored during that time period. And then here's where it gets fun. So let's say number 6 is a problem child. In the second period, he was called for slashing, was called for 1:30, and that was at 11:15. His penalty for that started at 11:15, but then he got called for misconduct too. Maybe he was mouthing the officials as they came off the ice. You can tell a misconduct call whenever the official like puts both hands on their hips and kind of like I don't know what kind of movement, you'll have to YouTube it, but the misconduct call is pretty obvious because all of a sudden there's another player coming into the box. They're the ones that are serving this 1:30. The kid who got called for the misconduct gets a 10-minute penalty, but this 10-minute penalty is not concurrent with this other penalty. So they don't serve, they call it a 2 and 10, but for these younger groups, it's 1:30 and 10. They don't serve just 10 minutes. They serve that 1:30, and then they serve the 10-minute. So you don't want to fill in that start until this other one expires or until the other team scores. If you look back up here, you see how this team scored on a power play? That's because this kid was in the box, right? So his second penalty actually starts with the goal. So he didn't serve 11 minutes and 30 seconds of penalty. He served whatever that time was where this other kid went on the ice. And then I should have put 11 in there, sorry. And then he would serve the rest of that. And then if it is full strength for both sides, he has to wait for a whistle to come out. So I always tell the other penalty box, whatever penalty box that kid is in, he's coming out at 1 minute and a whistle, whatever that time is, and then a whistle. And they know that. And usually whenever there's a break in the play and the officials are over, I usually tell them, hey, he's coming out at 1 minute and a whistle. And that way they know that I know what they're talking about as well. So I don't know if that makes any sense. If you need help with that, let me know and I can kind of go over it again with you. But basically, this minute 30 either runs out by itself and then this other 10 minutes starts, or this 1:30 stops whenever somebody scores a goal against this team, and then that 10 minutes starts again. So I want to move on to this next part here. So in the next period, in the third period, number 6 cross-checks a kid, and then he has another misconduct call. Same thing kind of happens, except what happens is now he has 4 penalties. That creates a game misconduct. You can only have this 4th penalty that he got from the misconduct call gave him a game misconduct, because you can only have 4 penalties per game and then you get ejected. So just be aware, if your players are creeping up, any player is creeping up on 3 penalties, I always tell the other coach, I always tell the other box attendant, hey, they have 3, just so you know. And then if they get that 4th one, they automatically get a game misconduct. You may need to tell the officials this. That may be something that you have to let them know if that happened. So you can tell how quickly you can get to 4 if you have 2 misconducts, because he really only had 2 penalties, but he created more situations for himself and got himself a game misconduct in the process, and then was ejected. Sorry, right on there, eject. And if you see, it says game misconduct for 4+ penalties, basically. A coach can also get ejected if they have more than a certain number of penalties. I think it's 12. It depends on the age group, but I think it's 12 for this group. You'd have to look up your rules. It really does pay to know your rules or have a rule book, and it also pays to pay attention. Don't get so caught up in the play that you don't see what the official is indicating, like what kind of penalty it is, or you forget what time the penalty happened, because your score sheet is the official scorecard. So, don't worry too much about what's going on. In fact, when there's a whistle, I automatically look at the time on the clock and I keep that mental, because if they come over and all of a sudden a kid is coming in the box, I didn't realize they had a penalty, and all of a sudden they're starting the clock again, I don't know what time it is. So it's a really good habit to get into, just to look at the clock and see what time it is pretty much every time a whistle goes off. So hopefully that helps. There's always a lot of questions about the 2 and 10s. There's always a lot of questions about the different kinds of penalties or when you start them. But the main thing to remember is this is when they're off the ice. This is when their penalty started. Most of the time they're going to be the same, but sometimes they won't be the same. All right. Good luck, guys.